Hello everyone, my name is Hannah and I managed to score a perfect 45 out of 45 in the IB diploma program. I scored a 7 in English, biology, chemistry, math, economics and Chinese. And to be honest, English was the subject that caused me the most headache back when I was going through the IB. I was one of the people that really didn't know how to properly break down a text and go into that deeper, insightful analysis that my teacher always wanted from me. I was actually scoring 4s and 5s before, after many trials and tribulations, I've developed, in my opinion, a great strategy that made everything click. And well, after that, I got a 45. So today I'm going to share with you that exact strategy, which is adapted to the new English curriculum. And I'll show you how you can break down a text and write strong, insightful analysis. But just a small disclaimer beforehand. Yes, English can feel super subjective sometimes, and it feels like your grades depend on the weather or the mood of the examiner, but I truly believe that the framework that I'm giving you today will provide you with a very clear and confident approach to handle pretty much any sort of text that the IB might throw at you during an exam. I personally used it to score myself a 7, so try it and test it. Now, before we dive in, I want to share something exciting. I am actually working on a short IB English course that will include videos which you can watch in your own time and however many times you need. It will include essential high-yield English analysis technique advice, as well as step-by-step breakdowns of exemplar essays, including some of my past works. I will also be providing you with studying strategies to prepare for exams under the new curriculum. I've put a link in the description below. Please fill out that Google form if you think you'd be interested in an online IB English course. I'll also be giving you an idea of how I studied back when I was in the IB to secure myself 7s. Now, without further ado, let's jump into some IB English advice. Okay, so let's jump straight into this. How I got a 7 in IB English Paper 1 and how you can too if you use this framework and practice this strategy that I'm going to give you today. Okay, so it actually surprises me how many times my students come to me having no idea what is involved in English in an English exam when they have an exam in about 2 or 3 days. So just to give you guys an idea, you will receive 2 unseen texts. Even if you are in standard level or higher level, you get 2 unseen texts. It's just that standard level, you get to choose and analyze one text in 1 hour and 15 minutes, whereas in HL, you are forced to analyze both texts in 2 hours and 15 minutes. It is pretty much the same thing, but the HL people just have to do it twice and do it faster. Text types will differ based on whether you are taking the language and literature course or if you are taking the literature course. Okay, so step 1. Please be very careful of older resources that are online right now for IB English. The new IB English curriculum is very different from past versions. A lot of online material is outdated or irrelevant. The current IB focuses a lot less on context and more on technique. Contemporary analysis is now far more emphasized over context interpretation. Also, however, if you are going to use context interpretation to go into deeper analysis, the IB really likes that. But it is no longer an essential part of your essay. So if you come across any of the past resources that really emphasizes the need for you to do context evaluation, please be a little bit careful about that and take it with a grain of salt. Because that kind of advice is a little bit outdated these days. Okay, so moving on. What do I do when I'm in the middle of an exam? So the first thing that I try to do is calm down, or to the best of my ability, and then I will read the entire text. Once I've selected my text out of the 2, if I was standard level, I'll read the entire text once without stopping, just to get a general feeling of the text and to get a general vibe of the text. On the second and third readings, I will underline the techniques and I will also make a lot of annotations. I recommend you focus on tone, diction, structure, and also other techniques, text type specific techniques during your annotation phase. Right, so these are just some must-know techniques. I refuse to let you go into the exam without you knowing what a metaphor or simile is. So if there is any sort of techniques on this slide that you don't know, I recommend you go and either search it up, study it, find some online free resources. But if I'm actually working on a video that will show you how I personally put techniques into a hierarchy, and that will be part of my online English course. So if I eventually finish it and if you guys purchase it, I will show you how I will analyze and how I will rank techniques, which I feel like is really, really helpful in terms of showing what the writer is trying to do, and also providing very high quality analysis. But of course, there's also a bunch of free resources out there that I also highly recommend you check out. So please, please, please go and study up on any of these techniques that I have on the slide right now. If you don't know what a metaphor, simile, personification, tone, atmosphere, mood, diction, voice, the 4 types of imagery, well, 4 main types of imagery, there is more that appeal to your senses. Irony, there's also different types of irony, juxtaposition and contrast, and also your structural techniques. And I also recommend you definitely go study up on your text type specific techniques for example, in terms of speeches and advertisements and comics. There are techniques that are specific to that, and some English may call it text type specific conventions. So definitely go and study up, at least study up on the techniques that I have on the slides right now. So back when I was just starting off English, I did not appreciate the plan enough. I don't know where I got this, but a wise man once said, your essay can only be as good as your plan. So the planning stage, after all of these trials and tribulations, after all of my practice, I have come to realize that the planning stage would most likely be the hardest part of your essay writing in an exam if you plan to write a great essay. So it will help you write with purpose, clarity, and structure, and it will be your key to a 7. So definitely, back when I was doing the IB, I didn't appreciate the plan enough at the start, and then eventually I managed to practice my technique, and it definitely helped me get that 7 in the end. Okay, so I'm just going to be showing you my planning strategy. Okay, so now I'm going to be showing you my planning strategy, which is literally going to be the key to your 7. So the first thing that I want you to do is identify the main purpose. Now, what I want you to take away from this video is that anything to do with purpose must start with a verb. So please remind yourself, if you're trying to describe purpose, any sort of purpose, especially the main purpose, it will be with a verb. To persuade the reader to buy something, to ridicule a particular aspect of society, to emphasize, my all-time favorite verb to describe purpose, emphasize. I highly recommend you to find synonyms for emphasize because I use it so much. Whenever you're stuck, just to emphasize a particular message. And so first, anything purpose must start with a verb. Now, if you've been with me for a while in terms of tutoring and also English advice, you will know that I have coined something which I like to refer to as sub-purposes. So basically, you'll have to write 3 paragraphs. Well, usually 3 paragraphs, and you need a main point to write for each paragraph. Instead of saying idea to write about in that paragraph, I like to say I have coined sub-purposes. So TM, not yet. But I recommend you to remind yourself that you need to, in your planning stage, you need to find 3 sub-purposes. What is that? Why do I like to coin sub-purposes? It's because it reminds you that it must still start with a verb. So the writer does something. The writer does something to achieve its main purpose. Purpose in any sort of circumstance is to do something. So the main purpose is the main goal that the writer is trying to achieve. Your sub-purposes is the 3 things that the writer does along the way to achieve this main goal. So it will be to persuade you to promote or like agree with a certain thing. It would be to emphasize a certain message. And by the end, you should be able to say that by achieving the first sub-purpose, and then achieving the second sub-purpose, and then achieving the third sub-purpose, the writer is able to achieve his main purpose. So this is literally what you're going to be writing out in your conclusion. Summarize and synthesize. So for your plan, I recommend you just abbreviate it MP, main purpose, to verb, something. It will be to do something, to sell something, to emphasize something, to maybe sell the car that they are trying to advertise in that advertisement. So, and then you'll have your 3 sub-purposes, which is the 3 smaller actions that the writer does in order for you to agree with his main purpose or to achieve his main purpose. So to do something, to do something, to do something. Okay, so I definitely recommend you practice planning with this kind of structure. So these will guide your paragraph structure and technique selection. I'm also working on a video that will show you how to structure paragraphs, structure your introduction, body paragraphs, and conclusion, but that might come out later. So I'm still working on it. Okay, so example analysis or example plan. So all I want you to do is determine your main purpose. See how it is to do something, to promote sustainable consumer behavior. Your first sub-purpose, still a purpose, it will be the writer does this first before achieving his main purpose. So it will be to highlight a particular message. So even if you have a clear idea of the message that the writer is trying to highlight, I still definitely recommend you force yourself to put a verb in front of that. So it will be to highlight the environmental impact of plastic. Now, onto the second sub-purpose here. What I don't like about this is the fact that they put techniques in the topic sentence or in the sentence that describes your sub-purpose. Why? Because as an examiner, some examiners may read this and they might get the idea that you are only going to be talking about imagery and emotive language in this paragraph. That's not good for you because it is restrictive. What happens if you move on and then you realize that use of personification is a great way to appeal to guilt? It will be a little bit weird to the examiner to suddenly read about personification when you haven't mentioned it in your topic sentence. Of course, if you're doing a typed up essay, you can always add it in later. But if you're still taking written essays, it's very hard to add in stuff once you've moved on. So what I recommend you do here is, yes, definitely keep the verb to start, but to elaborate on what sort of guilt you are trying to appeal to. So appeal to the guilt of readers who may have littered out of convenience in the past. So just elaborate more. Appeal to the sense of guilt that readers may feel when they don't, for example, recategorize their rubbish. And so tell me a little bit more about the idea and try to avoid restricting yourself by putting techniques into your sub-purpose paragraph, into your sub-purpose sentence, sorry. Okay, so, and then on to the last sub-purpose. Here, yes, you are talking about a technique, but if you watch the video that I'm preparing for my IB course on English techniques, tone is tone is a technique that I put higher up in the hierarchy. So if you think you are able to support the use of tone through fundamental basic techniques and enough fundamental basic techniques, and if you think that tone is a very essential part of this text, then yes, you can put it in the sentence to describe your main subpurpose for this paragraph. But in general, if you don't think that it is very well elaborated on, try to avoid putting any sort of techniques into your subparagraph sentence. Now, of course, I do recommend you for English do what you're comfortable with, and I will also be showing you how I will break down a particular text. So let's go into a exemplar breakdown. Alrighty, now we see here a past IB English exam text. Before we begin, just a note on the guiding questions. I know it is very controversial, but in my opinion, you should definitely not structure your entire essay on a guiding question. It is just there to guide you. It will tell you things that are worth analyzing, and you should most definitely include the things that they tell you to analyze in the guiding question somewhere in your essay. But by no means should you structure your entire essay on this. Of course, it's a little bit controversial, and a lot of other English teachers will tell you otherwise. But in my opinion, after going through the IB English exam, that's what I feel like is the most correct way of interpreting a guiding question. They're just guiding you into specific aspects of the text that is worth analyzing. Okay, so I want you to pause the video and have a look at this text. And I want you to try and practice what I suggested by breaking it down into the main purpose and your 3 sub-purposes. Okay, so hopefully you've had some time to break down this text, and I would say the main purpose of this text would be to warn the audience of the excessive dependence, of the sinister implications of the excessive dependence on technology. So you see how the main purpose here somewhere, it will have a verb, to warn the audience of the sinister implications of the excessive dependence on technology. And then I would say your sub-purposes may be the fact that so your first sub-purpose will be the fact that the author emphasizes that before the use of technology that the character was happy. Of course, you can always word this more formally in your actual essay. The second sub-purpose will be the author shows the degradation of the character. Shows here is the verb. And then last but not least, the author showcases the spiral into addiction. And this is where I'm going to plan to talk about the final few frames in relation to the cartoon as a whole. So I will be talking about definitely I am incorporating what they are suggesting me analyze in the guiding question, but I'm definitely not centering my entire analysis on a guiding question. I will be talking about characterization during my first 2 paragraphs, where I focus on the first sub-purpose and the second sub-purpose. Now, after you've broken it up, this really comes down to a lot of practice. Being able to break up text into the main purpose and the 3 sub-purposes. So the main thing that the writer is trying to do, the 3 smaller steps that the writer does before achieving the main thing that he is able to do. And then after this, I will suggest I'll put this into my other videos as well, but definitely, I'm sure you should be fairly familiar with peel or teal. And then your point or your topic sentence will be on your subpurpose. So just reword your subpurpose. But just try and avoid putting any techniques into your first sentence that describes your subpurpose in a body paragraph. And then you have your evidence, which you will find a technique to support this subpurpose. Your explanation to explain how it supports this subpurpose. And I will also, where you will talk about effect on reader. And then last but not least, you have a linking sentence. I'll also be making a video on techniques and also the potential effects on reader, but you should be fairly familiar with the peel or teal structure by now in senior school IB English. Anyhow, so it becomes fairly easy after you manage to break it down into subpurposes because all you need to do is find techniques and you can work your way down the hierarchy. But trust me, there will usually be a technique hidden there somewhere, eye of faith, in order to support any sort of subpurpose. And in reality, you're not just going to be peeling, you're going to be finding multiple techniques. They say 2 or 3 at the very least. You're going to be having multiple technique explanation pairs in order to support your main subpurpose. And showing the examiner how the author achieves this subpurpose in this particular paragraph. And then in your conclusion, you just write that by achieving subpurpose 1, and then achieving subpurpose 2, and then achieving subpurpose 3, the writer achieves his main purpose. That will come in your conclusion. And so that will pretty much be how you will end this. Your introduction should only be kind of like rewording your plan. Feel free to put in a hook at the very start, but as long as you mention all of your 3 subpurposes, it should be fine. Okay, so introduce your main purpose, mention your 3 subpurposes, plus or minus a hook at the very start, and then a link to your first body paragraph where you will start by talking about how the writer achieves his first subpurpose. And then you'll find techniques in the text somewhere to support your subpurpose and be creative. Honestly, English, I don't consider myself as a particularly creative person, but in IB English, hate to break it to you, you gotta be at least a little bit creative. So be creative, but don't be too creative. And then this should pretty much set you out for analyzing mostly any sort of text. As long as you're able to break up the text into subpurposes, you'll pretty much always be able to find techniques to support your argument. Or you're just going to have to be a little bit more creative with it. So definitely know your techniques, because the more techniques you know, the more likely you are able to find a technique that will support your subpurpose very quickly. And so that is pretty much what I definitely recommend you guys practice. Practice breaking down and forcing yourself to put a verb in front of the ideas that you think the writer is writing about. So the writer is emphasizing. He is doing something. He is doing something with that idea. He is emphasizing that idea to the reader. Put a verb in front of the ideas that the author is trying to convey, and that will probably remind. And the fact that I coined subpurposes is purely to remind you to put that verb in front of the idea that the author is trying to convey, because it allows you to show that how does the author achieve this subpurpose, And by achieving all of these three sub-purposes, the author achieves his main purpose. Right. So that is pretty much my highest yield kind of advice for breaking down a text. And I'm also personally, I would also like to run some revision workshops. So looking to run some workshops on other subjects. For English, there's not a lot of theory. So I'm just working on that short online English course. So please let me know if you're interested, and feel free to ask me some questions through the form as well in terms of like study technique. Right, so that will be the end of today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hello everyone, Hannah from the future here. Hopefully you found this video showing you how to break down a text very useful. My main aim today was to give you a format to approach text and also show you how to structure your essay. You should now discuss your three sub-purposes as the main focus of your three body paragraphs. And actually, I have very good news. I would just like to formally announce that I have managed to complete my IB English course, and I'm actually really proud of it. I will show you exactly how to write a paragraph structured around a sub-purpose in this course that I've managed to complete. Not only that, I will give you super valuable English analysis advice and also break down level 7 essays in a lot of detail. I have condensed all the most high-yield theory into this short, sharp, and shiny course. So I honestly really urge you to check it out. Please feel free to send through any questions and feedback. I will actually be including a frequently asked questions section into my course. And last but not least, thank you so much for tuning in and best of luck with your exams.